My name is Elise Garner, and my father calls me his ordinary daughter. He tells people I work somewhere in hospital administration, a harmless little job that won't threaten anyone's pride. What he doesn't know is that I'm an anesthesiologist at Mount Sinai, the one who kept his future daughter-in-law alive 3 years ago when her heart stopped on the table. That fact sits between us like a secret I never asked to keep. When my phone buzzed that morning, my mother's name flashed across the screen. "Your father wants you to come to the engagement dinner," she said. Her voice caught between caution and habit. "Just don't mention your work. All right? He doesn't like when people get confused about who the real doctor is in the family." I stared at the message, the words neat and familiar, and answered, "He's been hiding me for years." Mom, I got used to it. Her silence on the other end told me she had too. As I slipped my keys into my coat pocket, another notification appeared from Aaron Walsh. "My colleague at Mount Sinai saw your brother at a conference in Jersey," he wrote. "Not finance insurance. Selling policies. Not managing them." I read the line twice, feeling a quiet click inside me. The kind that precedes anesthesia before surgery calm. Cold. Inevitable. Evidence. Not emotion. Has always been what steadies me. I looked out my apartment window at the gray Manhattan skyline and whispered to no one. So, he's been lying again. It wasn't surprise, it was confirmation. My father would stand tonight and call him the family's success, the son who carried the Garner name with pride. I would stand in the same room, invisible as always, waiting to see what truth would finally surface when no one could stop it. The engagement dinner looked exactly the way my father liked, his life expensive and rehearsed. I stood near the back, half hidden behind a marble column, watching him shake hands like he was closing a deal. "To family," he said, raising his glass. "And to my son, Owen, the pride of the Garners." The word pride lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. When I was 19, I asked him for help paying tuition, and he laughed as if I'd told a joke. "You don't need a degree that costs $150,000, he said. "You just need to find a good man and build a home." I remembered the smell of his bourbon and the quiet scrape of his watch against the table. Small details that told me his decision was final. That night, I filled out my first student loan form and learned how silence could cost more than money. At the dinner, a guest turned to him and asked, "Don't you have a daughter?" He smiled without looking in my direction. "She works at a hospital. Something simple with paperwork." I watched the man nod politely. And in that instant, I understood the pattern, every lie polished enough to sound like care. Every omission dressed as modesty. Evidence always hides in tone before it hides in words. As Owen laughed beside him, I realized my father hadn't changed. He'd only learned to make his prejudice sound civilized. The room applauded, and I clapped too, because pretending was the only language this family ever truly mastered. Madison Reed found me near the dessert table, her smile polite but curious. "You're Owen's sister, right?" she asked, her tone careful in the way people speak when they're afraid of saying too much. I nodded once, and she glanced at the ring on my hand. "Are you in medicine?" she asked. And when I said yes, her eyes lingered like she was searching for a memory that refused to fade. She laughed softly. "I once met a doctor who sounded like you," she said. "I was in a car accident years ago, and she told me something I'll never forget, that surviving isn't the same as living." My throat tightened before I could stop it. "That sounds like something I would say," I replied, but I kept my voice even. Because emotion gives away more than truth ever should. Evidence always waits in the smallest tremor. Madison's expression shifted. Realization, catching up to recognition. "That doctor was you, wasn't it?" she whispered. I didn't answer right away. But silence has a way of confessing what words can't. It was you, she said again, this time with certainty, and the space between us filled with something heavy and quiet. The echo of that hospital room still lived somewhere inside her eyes. I managed a nod, and she exhaled sharply. You saved my life. And Owen never told me his sister was a doctor, she said. I smiled faintly. He likes keeping his stories simple. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say more. But then Owen called her name from across the room. She looked between us. Confused now, caught between two versions of the same truth. As she turned away, I realized that fate had already begun its slow and deliberate correction. My father stepped onto the small stage with his glass raised, the gold rim catching the light. Thank you all for being here, he said. Voice practiced. Confident. Tonight, we honor my son Owen, the pride of the Garner family, a man of drive, intellect, and vision. The applause that followed was polite, rehearsed, the kind people give when they know what's expected of them. He continued, our family believes in hard work, in investing where it matters most. And Owen has proven that commitment pays off. Someone near me asked, and your daughter? My father didn't hesitate. She works at a hospital. Something administrative. Keeps her busy. But she's happy. The ease in his tone was the same one he used when ordering wine comfortable. Detached. Transactional. I felt my fingers tighten around the glass in my hand. My mother smiled too widely. A reflex polished by years of smoothing the edges of his cruelty. Richard, a guest said quietly. I had no idea you had a daughter. My father laughed. Yes. She's here somewhere. But this night belongs to Owen. He's the one carrying the family legacy. His words hit like a dull. Predictable. Familiar. Precise. Deliberate. Evidence of contempt is never in volume, it's in omission. Owen lifted his glass, pretending not to hear, pretending not to notice that I was standing right there. I set mine down. Interesting, I said, my voice steady. I didn't realize lying about your children counts as family values now. My father turned, the smile freezing just short of his eyes. Eliza, he said under his breath. This isn't the time. I met his gaze. Calm and unblinking. It's never the time when truth costs you reputation. Is it? The table beside us went still, the applause fading into a silence thick enough to taste. And for the first time in years, I didn't look away. Madison found me again near the corridor, her voice low but urgent. Owen told me you handle hospital paperwork, she said, searching my face. Why would he lie about something like that? I held her gaze and answered evenly. You should ask him. Her brow furrowed, and the air between us thinned with the kind of silence that usually precedes truth. She stepped closer. You're Dr. Garner, aren't you? The anesthesiologist from Mount Sinai. I didn't speak. But hesitation itself is proof when someone already knows the answer. 3 years ago, she continued, her voice trembling. I woke up after my accident and a doctor stood beside me. Told me I had a second chance. That doctor was you. I said nothing. And she exhaled as though the confirmation had been hiding in my restraint all along. You saved my life, she whispered. And Owen never told me his sister was a doctor, I said quietly. He likes keeping things uncomplicated. Her lips tightened. He told me he's a financial consultant. Elise. Is that another simplification? I looked at her phone, still glowing in her hand. Search his name and find out. The truth rarely requires witnesses. It only needs curiosity. She tapped the screen, and I watched her face shift from confusion to disbelief. Heritage Insurance, she read, the words catching in her throat. He sells policies. I nodded once. For at least 2 years. She closed her eyes, whispering. He said he was still in training. That the hours were brutal. I replied softly. They are. Just not for him. When she opened her eyes again, they were different, clear. Sharp. Resolved. He's been lying to me for 2 years, she said. He's been lying to everyone, I answered. In that moment, Madison didn't cry or shout. She simply straightened her shoulders. Evidence changes people faster than emotion ever could. And the truth had just rewritten her entire future. Madison walked back into the ballroom, her expression steady in a way that made the room quiet without a word. Before I thank the Garner family, she said, I want to thank someone else, the woman who saved my life 3 years ago. Her name is Dr. Elise Garner. And she's here tonight. Every head turned toward me as she continued. She's also Owen's sister. The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was stunned. I didn't know this until now, Madison said, her voice unwavering. Owen never mentioned that his sister is a doctor. In fact, he told me she works in hospital administration. My father's jaw tightened. This isn't the time. Madison, he said. His tone clipped and rehearsed. It's exactly the time, she replied. Because I also just learned that Owen isn't a financial consultant. He works for Heritage Insurance. He's been lying to all of us. The room rippled with murmurs like static before a storm. Owen stepped forward. Face flushed. That's not true, he said. But Madison raised her phone. Your company's website says otherwise. He stammered. You're misunderstanding. But she didn't flinch. No, I'm not. You lied about your job, your sister, and your life. You lied to me. My father tried to intervene. But every eye in the room had already shifted to me. The invisible daughter now fully visible. Elise, my father said quietly. Say something. I met his gaze and replied. Truth doesn't need my help. Dad, it's already doing fine on its own. A few guests gasped. Others turned away. But one voice cut through the noise. Dr. Garner, a man said, stepping closer. I read your paper on surgical anesthesia at Mount Sinai. Impressive work. My father's face drained of color as recognition spread among his peers. The applause began tentatively, then grew. Not loud, but sure. Like justice rediscovering its voice. My father muttered, You're making a spectacle of this family. I looked at him. Calm and certain. No. You did when you erased me. I'm just giving everyone the unedited version. The clinking of glasses and whispers filled the room again. But this time, I wasn't the one hiding behind the noise. For the first time, I let the truth breathe. And it filled every corner he once claimed as his own. When the crowd began to scatter, my father finally turned to me. His voice low and clipped. You humiliated me tonight, he said, as if reputation were the only wound that mattered. I met his eyes and answered, No. Dad, you humiliated yourself when you decided your son's image was worth more than your daughter's truth. He straightened, grasping for authority that no longer worked on me. I was protecting you, he said. But the sentence came out brittle. From what? I asked. Success? His jaw flexed. From disappointment. You've always been difficult. I laughed softly. Difficult is what men call women who refuse to stay small. The air between us carried years of silence condensed into one conversation. And every word felt like proof of how long he'd mistaken control for love. You think I owe you an apology? He said. Half sneer. Half defense. I think you owe yourself honesty, I replied. You invested $150,000 in Owen's future and couldn't spare a word of belief for mine. And look how that turned out. He tried to interrupt. But I didn't stop. You built your pride on his potential and ignored my results. That's not parenting. That's accounting. His silence said more than denial ever could. Then my mother's voice broke the space between us. Elise. I knew. She whispered, her hands trembling. I knew everything you achieved. And I never said a word. I was afraid. I looked at her, the anger softening into something heavier. Then say it now. Mom, I said. Say what you never could. Her eyes filled. I'm proud of you, she managed. The words fragile but real. I nodded once, letting the quiet settle. For the first time, the silence in our family didn't belong to him, it belonged to me. In the weeks that followed, the fallout unfolded quietly, the way truth always does when it's undeniable. Madison ended the engagement without spectacle, sending back the ring with a note that read, I choose honesty over inheritance. Owen lost his job at Heritage Insurance after they learned he'd fabricated his resume. My father was asked to take an early retirement, not because of scandal, but because his reputation, his favorite currency, had finally devalued itself. My mother started therapy, the kind that teaches you how to speak before guilt rewrites the sentence. One afternoon she called and said, I told my counselor about you, about how proud I am. I listened without interrupting, letting the sound of her effort mean more than the words themselves. Healing, I've learned, has no witnesses. It happens in the quiet spaces between what's said and what's forgiven. At the hospital, I returned to my usual 12-hour shifts, guiding patients into sleep and back again, the way I always had. Aaron stopped by between surgeries and said, You handled that with more control than most people handle a coffee spill. I smiled. Practice, I told him. Years of it. He laughed. But we both knew it wasn't a joke. The evidence of survival is rarely dramatic, it's routine. One evening, after a long case, I checked my phone and saw a new message. Dad here. I'd like to talk. I typed back. When you're ready to listen, I'll be here. Then I locked the screen and looked out across the city, its lights flickering like quiet heartbeats. For years, I thought silence meant erasure. But standing there, I understood it differently. Some truths don't echo, they just stay. Steady and alive. Long after the noise has faded. I used to think justice looked like confrontation. But standing at the edge of my quiet apartment, I realized it sounds more like peace. The city outside hummed with its usual chaos. But inside, everything finally felt balanced, no noise. No pretending. No need to prove I belonged. My father's message stayed unanswered for days. Not out of anger, but because silence had finally become something of my own choosing. Sometimes victory isn't loud. It's the steady calm that follows truth when it no longer needs defending. At work the next morning, a patient thanked me before being wheeled into surgery. You have a peaceful voice, she said. And I smiled because peace was never something I thought I'd earn. In the reflection of the glass, I saw not the daughter who had to fight for acknowledgement, but a woman who had stopped asking for permission to exist. The evidence of healing, I've learned, is how easily you breathe when no one is watching. That night, as I closed my laptop and the city lights flickered against the window, I spoke softly into the quiet. If you've ever been erased, stand tall. You don't have to scream to be heard. Just live so loudly that silence can't contain you anymore. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every one of them. And remember, the truth doesn't need permission to exist. Take care of yourself. You're worth it.